Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 403, recorded live on October 24th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have Voodu returning to us again.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
We also have Chai.
Hello.
Welcome back, guys. This week's screenshot, there was no screenshot of the week this week. So what I did was I took a shot from this week's DDOCast Splat, where we had a lot of splatting, and this was at the end of Assault on the Summerfield, where a couple people were dead, and there's a couple soul stones in there. It was a wild week, was it not, Chai?
I've never seen Zerging in permadeath like this before.
Makes it exciting television, right?
It was funny. It was like a comedy show.
We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. And I'm sure we'll hear about it from Lessa. Well, maybe my theory is that because we were missing Lessa again, she kind of reminds us, it's permadeath, kind of keeps us in line, as it were. So I think we were missing that a little bit this week. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, or from our website, DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by Cyber Ears, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be a recorded show and will come out probably Friday evening. My work schedule is really weird this week, and we're in tech, and this show's huge. Yeah, we're host. You can stay updated by following us on social media pages or from our website at DDOcast.com. We also have a calendar you can subscribe to. It's pretty slick. It lets you know when the shows are, when DDOCast Splat is as well. And I also keep the sales and bonus days and stuff on there as well. On the podcast this week, Update 28 Patch 1 came out. We also have some other news. The Night Revels was previewed yesterday, so we'll talk about that. But our roundtable discussion, we're going to talk about raid caliber tanking. We're going to start off with the build portion. Then we're going to kind of go through the raids. We might actually make the raids a separate recorded show for later. But we're going to start with kind of building raid tanks. Because there's a little bit more that you need to do than just generic grab a shield and go tank. And it's not quite that simple, generally. So that's going to be kind of our topic of discussion. So just to kind of to start it off, when we say raid caliber tank, what do you guys think that means? Just kind of as a baseline general idea.
I thought it was just grabbing a shield and go tanking. So, you want to be able... Oh, go ahead, buddy.
No, I was saying he told you it wasn't that.
I know, I thought...
Hey, for some people that might be what it is, but...
So being a raid caliber tank means being able to control the raid boss, or whatever mobs are, and usually that means a raid boss. And that means establishing and holding aggro, reacquiring aggro. It means keeping the aggro off the party. And in some cases it means setting the tone or the tempo of like an end fight or a boss fight.
Yeah, it also means being able to survive what it throws at you, at
Yes.
least long enough for either your dedicated healer to throw heals or you to throw your own heals, depending upon what you built in order to survive it.
So holding aggro, staying alive is what I'm hearing. Which I think are probably the two most important things, right? That's kind of where it's got to start. If you're not holding the aggro of the raid boss, you're probably not tanking very well. And if you're dead, you're probably not holding the aggro very well.
Also
So
a fact.
These are good things to keep in mind.
Starting with the basics.
I have noticed lately that when you're dead, you can still hold the aggro of some mobs. So I might try to
I've
build
seen
like
that.
a dead tank, because I can't take damage when I'm dead.
I don't know
That's
how it's going to work out for you.
The martyr build.
Yeah.
That's a soulstone build, right? That's what
Yes.
how that works.
It's the new tank.
All right.
Unhittable armor class. It's light blue armor.
So let's start with holding aggro, because we kind of established that that's a main part of that. So what are some things when we're talking about more building, less like actual play and skill level, but what are some things we can be building towards to be keeping that aggro and holding on to that?
Well, let's mention the behind-the-scenes mechanism first, and that is that sort of invisible list of hate that every mob has. And when I say hate, I'm talking about the amount of DPS, also including any multipliers that you do to a mob. So in this case, like a raid boss. So there's an invisible list of how much damage it's taking or how much hate is being generated on that raid boss. And so like this sort of most basic form of generating hate is just by doing damage to the boss. But then there's gear that increases your hate on a boss as well, and I believe that's called Insight, and there are some enhancements as well. And if you are on top of that hate list, then you have the aggro. And so you want to make sure that you're doing the most DPS, or you're generating the most hate, is a better way of saying it. And that's going to be one way that you establish and hold aggro.
Yeah, pretty much. I've found that sometimes attack rate has to do with that as well, or damage rate. Like if you have dots ticking and you're hitting it with more than one weapon. The mechanics behind it, like Intimidate skill, will put you at the top of the hate list temporarily, but then you have to keep that. So if, and then it also means people in your group who have the ability to overtake that level of hate, you can put on don't do it through their own election to not do it, or otherwise they pull the aggro off. So it can be just as much a cooperative effort than just your responsibility, like the one person or whatever, in order to maintain that aggro.
Like that archer hanging out with the mini shot, the old mini shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that. I remember in previous eras, the claw bracers were a popular item with the claw gloves, that whole set. And that added hate, and people sometimes would refuse to take those off. And then because of that, they would overcome your hate level easier if you were the tank. And sometimes the raid mob would turn around and smack the hell out of the party.
Well, even folks that have a defender stance, right? Those, or earth stance for monks, those have bonuses to hate as well.
Yep.
And a lot of players just run with that. Now, the defender stance has like a smaller amount of hate, and then one of the enhancement things in the trees is you can actually increase the amount of hate that's doing. But the earth stance, as you get better at earth stance, you start generating more hate in that regards.
Right, and that's also the survivability stance, so that being in a raid, and even if that person isn't the tank, they want to be in that stance because they can take a few more hits. But on the flip side, if it's generating too much hate for them, they may need to shirk that for the time being.
May not actually be conducive to their survivability, grabbing the aggro of the tank. Well, a tricky one. I think it's also worth mentioning, too, there are a lot of raid bosses that actually have a mechanic that flushes their aggro list.
That is true. That's a really good point.
Generally, these are ones that are going to teleport or go away for a moment and then come back. So that's always something to keep in mind. So sometimes it's not just actually holding aggro, but some of those raids, you really have to work at reestablishing that aggro as well. So it's not just a build-up over time thing and say, hey, let me have this guy by myself for a minute. Because at the end of that minute, he'll probably go away. So you've got some other mechanics that you have to kind of work with. And we'll kind of work with that later as we get farther into the show. What are there any kind of specific things that you like in terms of making sure you're holding on to aggro, generating that hate?
Well, I love Intimidate. Tanking in Unyielding Sentinel is awesome because it has extra hate generation, an enhancement that does extra hate generation.
That's like the first tier, right?
Yeah, it's
That's
right
really
there at the bottom,
low-hanging
so
fruit.
it's easy to twist in too. Also, your warlocks have an enhancement now on the Enlightened Spirit Tree, tier 1. But I love Intimidate because it's probably the easiest way to reestablish aggro, and reestablishing aggro is a skill that is, I think, underappreciated in tanking. It's so important to be able to reestablish aggro, because there are going to be times that people take the aggro away from you, and you need to be able to pull it back without it causing a big problem in the party. And like was mentioned earlier, when you hit Intimidate, as long as you succeed on your Intim check, and right now, by the way, I think it's like 108 Intimidate is no fail for any raid boss. I know there are some trash mobs and things that might be a little bit higher. In any event, when you hit Intimidate and you succeed on your check, you go right to the top of that invisible list of hate, and you reacquire aggro immediately. And when you do Intimidate for, I think it's like 8 seconds, you are generating extra hate with the DPS that you're doing.
Is there still a shield part of that too? Like if you're wearing a shield, you get an extra bonus?
I don't know.
If you have fighter or paladin levels and you're in that stance, I think some of those items require you to wear a shield or be in at least medium armor or heavy.
The upper ones do, but those are hit points and strength and constitution.
That, like those types of builds, will be wearing a shield. I haven't heard of anything that requires you to have a shield to generate hate, so I'm not sure on that.
There isn't one. I seem to recall. Let's see if I can look it up. I seem to recall there being something. A part of the mechanic is related to wearing a shield for Intimidate.
Is that in Vanguard?
No,
Possible?
it's the actual Intimidate skill. I'm looking it up. Please continue. We'll come back to that. Let's see. The thing with Intimidate, you got to remember that it puts you at the top of the list and it gives you a little bit of a buffer, but it's not foolproof, right? Because it's got a timer on it. So if the only thing you're using is Intimidate, you're probably not going to make it, right?
No,
because
you definitely got to still continue to DPS, and you got to have at least decent DPS. But the more hate generation gear you have, the lower DPS you can get away with doing. So, for example, that tier 1 enhancement in Unyielding Sentinel makes the DPS that you're doing generate 150% more hate than normal. That's very significant. Now, on Ginger Spice, and she is not a high DPS tune. I would consider her like a moderate DPS tune. Because I run in Sentinel, it is very rare that I lose aggro. And if I do, I just intim, and I get it right back.
So the answer to the Intimidate question, so when you Intimidate, you get a plus 50% threat multiplier to all attacks for 6 seconds. If you have a shield equipped, you will instead get a plus 100 threat multiplier for 12 seconds. So
Wow.
it's the same buff, but it's better with the shield.
Well, 150 without the shield or 100 with the shield, is that what you just said?
50 without for 6 seconds. It's 100% for 12 seconds with the shield. So it's longer and better
realize that.
with a shield.
Pretty cool.
I knew that it was there. I just didn't remember what the actual buff was. The other thing you should mention with Intimidate too is size matters. So, if for every size category the monster is larger than you, you actually get a penalty to your Intimidate. Now, this is part of the reason why we have these, like what you're saying, 108 is like the no fail for raid bosses. Like we can calculate what the no fail is on this kind of stuff. If you're a halfling, just kind of bear in mind that you'll need a little bit higher than that because you're small. Or if you're a gnome in the future, you will need to be a little bit higher than that because they are considered small, so they have 4 less than anyone else.
Gnome tank.
I don't expect to see too many gnome tanks out there.
We'll talk about gnomes later. I bet you will. Actually, I'll just say it now. Gnomes, I think, will probably be one of the more role-played races around. I think you'll see some people just want to be gnomes. So, in any case, one of the other ones that I want to mention, there's some racial enhancements. Warforged and Half-Orcs can generate extra hate with stances. We kind of already talked about the defender stances. That also, like, just the base defender stance has hate. Plus, there's some more available in their enhancement tree. If you're not planning on being a dedicated tank, I wouldn't take it. Like we were talking about earlier, where you kind of end up in, if you're an off tank, you don't want to be generating that extra threat. And then Paladins also have an enhancement that gives them plus 100% for, I think, like a minute. It's a pretty lengthy boost. Although I have not used it in a while. But just to give you an idea of what you can do if you start tacking on all that hate, my Paladin tank was, I was just because I could, not for any particular reason, but just chaining as much hate generation as I could, intimidating to get that, and then using the enhancement that gives him plus 100%, and he was in the Unyielding Sentinel. My pizza came early. Came a little earlier than I was expecting. So, I said, hey, my pizza's here, I gotta go get the door. So
now you've got priorities.
Yeah, right. So here we are in the middle of raid, and I'm taking Truthful One, and I head out and grab my pizza and, pay the pizza man. Have a little short conversation there and come back up, and I've still got aggro. And I left for 2 minutes to do anything for 2 minutes, and I still had aggro because I was generating that much hate.
There you go, the test of a solid tank.
Yeah, right. I was
pay for your pizza.
I was amazed.
If you still have aggro, you're good to go.
I couldn't believe that I still had aggro, let alone that they get me alive. I think I benefited a little bit because he went and flew in the air like twice in that amount of time or something like that. But this is something to keep in mind. I want to say Lord of Blades is the highest intimidation, but I don't know if that's still true.
I think he is the same as the dragons in Fire on Thunder Peak and the dragon in Temple of the Deathworm, which is 108.
Would be about right.
And that's the skill that you need for no fail.
Right.
Before modifiers.
Before the size modifiers.
Right.
Well, I think that assumes you're medium, right? So I think that includes the going up from medium. But if you're a halfling or a gnome in the future, you'll need to add another 4 to that, which is a little tricky to get. But it's
funny
doable.
that they incorporated that rule.
It is kind of funny for the halflings themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but hey, no. While we're on the subject of generating hate, I think we should at least, because we talked about it a little bit from the other side's perspective of don't generate extra hate. There are a lot of enhancements and items that that reduce your threat. So insight is generally gives you more threat. Diversion gives you less threat. So if you find that you are not tanking and suddenly become the tank a lot, consider investing in some of those. You might find it to be a little bit more to your advantage.
Yeah, your all-out DPS characters, which are still probably the most popular characters that people run.
Oh, absolutely.
By and far. Sometimes they won't let up, or they'll refuse to stop auto-attacking. So that's, people take it for granted because in Quest it's usually not even needed. But in a raid where, like an Epic Elite raid where, pulling aggro can wipe a good portion of the party, that's
At
good
least
stuff to invest in.
Most DPS,
a lot of those.
Most DPS characters aren't really built to go toe-to-toe with some of those raid bosses.
Yeah, and a lot of those raid mobs, when they swing, they hit everything in an arc sometimes, just like some regular mobs do, and that can lead to disaster real quick.
Tirith in the chat wants to know how much hate do the healers generate.
They only generate love.
Yeah, I think that was a discussion a while back to add something like that, but I don't think that ever gained any traction.
Assuming that was a serious question, and not joking with healers, I would say in general, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of hate unless you're doing mass cures and the mobs are undead. That's probably
In
where
other
you get the most
MMOs, that mechanic exists.
Ooh,
Like
interesting.
old school EverQuest, for instance, is a good example where you drop a complete heal on your raid tank too early. You might be the new tank for a little bit until the raid tank can reestablish that aggro. But in DDO, yeah, there was a discussion a couple of years ago, I remember, and it didn't gain a lot of traction at all to give like hate for healing and things of that nature and buffing.
I'd say given our struggles with lag and performance issues, it's probably best that they didn't have to keep track of that. Probably just a theory. I don't know. I think this with DDO more so, and I haven't played other MMOs, but I get the impression that more so than other MMOs, that DDO is much more allows for much more role differentiation, and the builds kind of tend to go in more different directions. So you can have more of a quote healer type, more tanky type kind of, and then you can get more into hybrids. That's my perception. I don't know that that's necessarily true.
Yes. You don't have to be as conventional in DDO. In a lot of other MMOs, once you choose your archetype, I mean, you do have like path choices and stuff, but once you choose what your archetype is, you're pretty much locked in. Some games you can spec out. Like if you're a paladin, you can spec into healing or spec into tanking or spec into DPS. But once you spec into tanking, you're like a tank until you respec your character. Where in DDO, you can be a druid or a favored soul and be a tank with like a couple levels of fighter or paladin and a good investment in survivability and hate generation. Where that isn't really overly common in other games. So you don't have to be the conventional fighter, sword and shield. You can, but it's not limited to that.
For a while, I was actually considering doing a TR project to do a completionist project and actually try and get a completionist. This is something I've kind of scrapped since then, and my idea was to make a tank out of every class with the expectation at level 20 to tank Vision of Destruction or Tower of Despair or something like that, and then tank something later.
Sure.
In epics, and kind of just make a tank out of every class.
Yep.
And try and keep it as pure as possible right now. I kind of felt like it was cheating, would have been cheating to do like 8 in one class and 6 in 2 others. So, like, actually have it be that class. In any case.
4 levels of fighter or paladin, and you can get a lot of those enhancements, and then you can take 16 levels of whatever you want.
Should we talk about what classes make good tanks? Because you can make a tank out of a lot of different classes.
Let's do that at the end.
Okay.
Or in the middle, or something. I do want to say, let's spend a few minutes kind of talking about, we kind of touched on it, that there are some raid bosses that flush their aggro in some way, shape, or form. So I want to talk about just acquiring aggro really fast. And I think if you know that the raid boss is going to be doing that, these are ones that you're probably going to want to save that Intimidate a little bit more. If they grab aggro from you, you need to grab it back. Yeah, sure, use an Intimidate. But you might want to kind of save that Intimidate more on your back burner, get aggro back, and reestablish aggro, as opposed to just spamming it as much as you can. And do you guys have any other kind of quick tips on that whole idea of getting that aggro back?
Well, one example would be like Lord of Blades when he does his Superman move. So, in addition to running over there and intimidating, it might even be easier in that situation, since he's moving around quick and you'd have to go chase him down, to just use a throwing weapon to pull him back. And one of the things that's important to do as a tank is communicate to your party what you expect of them. A good tank should be a good communicator. So, like for example, if you're doing Lord of Blades, say, hey, when he does his Superman move, everybody please lay off the DPS until I reestablish aggro, which is only going to take a few seconds. But if he lands and people are hitting him immediately, it can make it challenging to reestablish aggro.
That's basically practically what I was just going to say, actually. A lot of times people like to use their boosts because they want to get that maximum amount of time with their heightened damage while the boosts are active. And it's like right when he lands, you'll see boosts going off. So whether or not, like if I'm the tank, I want to be the guy to tell everybody when to boost. If I'm not, I'll let the tank know that they can be that person. If I'm the raid leader, they can say, all right, I got him, boost up DPS. I don't mind like some DPS when that's happening because usually I can override that with hate. But if you see like a bunch of speed boosts go off right when he hits the ground, chances are you're not going to be the tank unless you use that Intimidate again to pull him off.
Intimidate has what, a 15-second timer on it now?
Something like that.
I think so, yeah.
If not exactly 15 seconds, it's close to that.
Yeah, it's they made it a longer cooldown, but it gave it a little bit more boost. It used to be you could spam it like every 6 seconds, and you'd see a lot more turtle tanks. So they just shield up and drop Intimidate.
And it locked it down for the entirety of that time too. You didn't have any DPS if you had no fail Intimidate.
Yep. So let's kind of continue communicating with the party. I think it's a really good segue and one of the things we want to talk about. And I would say we're talking about Lord of Blades as the example. If someone grabs that aggro, have a plan for hey, if you get aggro, bring it to me. As opposed to the folks that would run away from you, you'd try and drop that Intimidate, and they'd pull them away from you out of range, and then they're stuck with them for another 15, 20 seconds.
Yeah, don't kite. That used to be a big deal when people would throw dots, and the dots grabbed aggro. Next thing you know, the person who can't, they're on a platform that can't really handle the aggro, so they try to run it around like they would, say, a regular mob. But if you're going to do that, just run it back onto the tank, and then maybe either block or even just stand there until the tank reestablishes. Focus on healing yourself rather than DPSing the mob.
Anything else you want to mention on the communication?
Well, it's like I said earlier, it's so important to be able to communicate to your party, even if you may be the tank, but you may not be the one with the star, but that doesn't mean that you're not in charge of leading a good portion of that raid or a good segment of that raid. So being able to communicate, and realize you might have some new people in the group, and you need to say, hey, attack the boss from the backside, because a lot of times newer players, they want to just stand like right in front or to the side, and maybe depending on the boss, they need to be at the backside, or be able to say, hey, when the boss's special attack is this, and when he does this, you need to scatter, you need to take a step back. Also, it's really good to be able to tell your healer where to stand. Maybe the healer's in a position where you want to move things a little bit, and he's not in a good spot. So being able to have an open channel and good communication with your healer is important too, if you're not self-sufficient. You don't want to make your healer hate you. If you piss off your healer, you might find yourself dead.
It's a good way to die. One thing I would say with communication too is remember that communication goes both ways, right? So part of you being a good communicator may be the raid leader saying, "Hey, bring the thing you're tanking over here," or it might just be even less kind of formal than that, and follow truth. There's a truthful one and a storm reaver, and most groups choose not to tank them in the same spot. It just kind of makes things easier. So there's a communication of I'm going to tank over here, you're going to tank over there. So kind of be aware of that. Also, you were saying you kind of touched on special attacks, and I think I'm going to use it as a nice little segue because one of the things that I wrote down for this is reacting to special attacks. And that's something that, as a tank, it's less in the building frame of mind. So is communication, but this is kind of more of a skill-based thing. and ties into communication, right? Like when there's a special attack, there's a couple things some things that might happen. Maybe it's a special attack that everyone can ignore. Maybe it's everyone else run away. I hope I survive, or stuff like that, right? Lord of Blades is a really good example of this, and Lord of Blades is a really good raid boss. But there's, he's got several special attacks. If he stuns the tank, then he does a follow-up combo move that is going to swing his sword behind him, and which is where most people are hanging out. The whirlwind attack. There's certain Rain of Blades. Like, these are things that, as the tank, you're probably paying much more attention to that boss. He's your job, right? As a tank, you don't need to worry about these other things. Let the rest of the party and the party leader, especially, unless you're the party leader, then you might have to double task. But if you're not the party leader and you're tanking, you can really focus on that boss. It's everyone else's job to take care of everything else. That tank is your job, or that boss is your job. You're tanking him, so you're going to be more focused on him, which allows you to, learn those tells and see the tells and let everyone else know that there's a special attack coming and they can react to that. And so you can react to that. That's important too.
Chronoscope was a huge example of that. Chronoscope was probably the first raid in this game where your build, I don't want to say it didn't matter, but your build was secondary to your actual play. If you could step away during certain times and nobody else grabbed aggro because of your communication, and then step back, removing curses when needed, things like that, boost your saves when needed, and then be able to be the first one to step back in and grab that aggro before everybody else steps back in. It was that and Lord of Blades were probably the first big two raid bosses that were more like other game bosses, where they had multiple different stages and multiple different types of attacks that they could do, other than one guy in the front and 11 people behind. Todd had a little bit of that. Vod had a bit of it, but it was more like those two bosses were as far as I'm concerned, the big two that were multiple stage guys that you really needed to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to have aggro for a few seconds and then I'm going to jump back in. It's not going to be like the whole stage of a raid.
Right. Hey, Chai, you might want to check your mic. I think it's kind of scratching something, maybe the cable or something. Getting a little stuff there.
All right.
Other thing, let's see. Anything else you guys want to say about special attacks? I mean, it's mostly, in my mind, it's mostly just being aware that what they are, learning the tells. If you really want to challenge yourself in that, go play with Lord of Blades. I always, one of the things I really loved about Lord of Blades was learning his tells, and because I mentioned this before, I'm an audio guy, so I tend to pay a little more attention to those. All of his tells actually have a unique audio signature to them. Kind of gives you a little bit extra time and kind of made it a lot of fun. But some of his tells are really short, especially the stun attack. If you can't pick up on that audio cue, it's really hard to block. We'll talk about that in more detail later, but that's just an example of one that has really good tell mechanics. But there's a lot of bosses that have that too. Vela has her smoke breath. The purple robot in Master Artificer has a big tell for his big shot, stuff like that. On that, I think just real quick, since it's kind of related, know the bosses is probably a good one. Maybe at least have a general idea of what they do. If it's your first time in the raid, it's probably not a great idea to be the tank, ideally. I've seen a lot of people have great success at that. I'm not saying that you can't do that at all. It's just going to be a little harder. Especially if it's everyone's first time. Then it gets really exciting. That first guinea pig, That's always a blast to watch. Let's see. We talked about this along kind of the beginning as one of the big things. Let's talk about survivability, because that's a big part of being a tank.
Huge.
If you're dead, you're not holding aggro.
No, you're not.
So, and you'll notice that we haven't actually at any point in time talked about how much DPS you're doing as a tank. We've talked about holding aggro, which is different, and staying alive. DPS is kind of tertiary to all of that. So let's talk about survivability. What are some things that players that want to aspire to be good raid tanks can do to keep themselves alive?
When I think of it like a true tank, I think of like AC and PRR above 200. And I don't have that on any of the tunes that I tank with. But, I feel like those are sort of good benchmark numbers to try to achieve if you're going that route. You also, MRR is good. And then dodge and evasion are valuable as well.
So go ahead, Chai.
I don't think I have AC or PRR above 200, but they're approaching that value. So I don't know if I have like a super complete character yet. I just keep TRing one at a time. But the layered defense. So if you're tanking something that like shoots one of the elemental damages, you probably want the 50 resist plus 30 absorb for that elemental damage, plus the MRR value, like Storm Reaver, for instance, with all of his lightning stuff, like that kind of thing. PRR and AC, anything that mitigates physical damage. And then, probably good blocking for most of the time, especially if you're an off tank. Like if you're tanking the mob that everybody else is beating on, that's one thing. But if you're tanking something else that, Storm Reaver, while everybody's beating on the truthful one, if you got decent blocking DR and, PRR, you can pretty much, survive that without having to overly deal too much damage, and then let the rest of the group do whatever they need to do.
I'd say if you're going to be a long-term successful, like really dedicate or want to be tanking repeatedly on a character, even if it's not your main your main weapon setup, you'll probably want to carry a shield just for turtle time. A great example of this would be Horoth in Tower of Despair, where everyone might go over and play with Sulamatis. You may find that you need to stop your DPS on Horoth, or you mentioned the Storm Reaver as well. You just need to stop DPS because you're going to kill him if you don't. If you have a shield, you can throw the shield on, which will increase your blocking. It gives you some better blocking ability to help, particularly if you're taking a lot of damage. Mitigate some of that incoming damage while you're waiting. Could be a good tactic. Let's say there's an interesting dynamic here because we're talking about AC, PRR, dodge, and evasion. AC is kind of on one side of this, but you kind of got PRR versus dodge and MRR versus evasion. They work in conjunction, but generally speaking, if you're boosting one, you're probably not going to have as much of the other. This is heavy tanks versus light tanks, right? Heavy tanks are going to have more PRR and MRR. Light tanks are going to have more dodge and probably have evasion. If they didn't have evasion, they probably should be wearing heavy armor, or at least medium. So let's talk about that a little bit. Do you find that you tend to favor one over the other in terms of tanking, or do you kind of change it up for various raids? What are you guys' preferences on that?
I've never made like a dodge evasion tank. All my tanks are like heavy armor, as high AC and PRR as I can get.
Right now, I do the heavy armor PRR thing, MRR, In previous eras, like back maybe 2011, when it was like Todd Elite was like part 1 was probably one of the hardest fights in the game at that time. I had a 13 rogue, 6 paladin, 1 monk that tanked really, really well on AC and evasion for like mitigating splash damage and stuff like that. But I don't want to say those days are over, because somebody, if they wanted to, could probably build a good, like, dodgy evasion tank.
Swashbuckler tanks are actually pretty decent these days.
Yeah.
Do light armor, buckler, some splash into defender stance. You can do a fair amount, even light.
Yeah, you can get a decent amount of PRR even on that too if you work at it. You can mitigate a decent amount of physical damage. It still seems to me like we're, in an era where the heavy armor stuff is more favored, in part because of the fact that MRR and PRR are much easier to get, even though they just kind of did away with the armor MRR. But also because of the fact that 4 levels of either one of those, like Paladin or Fighter, give you enhancements that give you more AC to your shield and your armor, as well as more PRR, and I'm not sure if there's an MRR enhancement in those or not.
The Defender stance does give MRR.
Yeah.
And you only really need 3 levels, too.
Yeah, I usually go for 4.
4 gets you a little speed boost, but 3 is all you need for the stance, and then it also gives you access to 1 tier of the greater stance enhancements, which you can take the hit points for if you have a shield or medium or heavy armor.
Yep.
Which can be a good one to go for. I tend to... I've always kind of tended to favor them, but especially nowadays, I definitely tend to favor the heavier armor tactic. Part of that is, the devs have stated that their design intent essentially is, if you have more of the dodgy evasion type, you get hit less often and you would take less damage overall if you were really excelling at that, but the damage that you do take will be much spikier, which leaves open for the potential for one-shot kills, which... Again, that's really hard. If you're getting a one-shot kill, then you might need to reconsider what you're doing, because that's hard. It's hard from a skill or at least from a healing perspective, to keep you up if you just get one shot. That's kind of how I tend to go. Now, my really dedicated tank has, I don't remember what his numbers are off the top of my head, but he's got good AC, great PRR, great MRR. I take as much dodge as I can get. Obviously, I don't have evasion because he's got heavy armor. I will say, if you don't have evasion, you will probably want to use at least a large shield, if not a tower shield, because you get your MRR gets multiplied by 2 against basically anything that evasion would work on. So that's something to keep in mind. And I don't really think that's not exactly I would say it's not a well-known aspect of that, in the sense that I don't really ever see tooltips about that. But there might be one somewhere, but it's kind of a background thing.
Earlier I mentioned, AC and PRR above 200 for like a true tank, and I don't want to scare people off of the idea of tanking. Those are pretty high numbers. So when I'm saying true tank, I'm thinking like a dedicated tank. Like if you got your numbers up there, you're going to be doing pretty well. But on Ginger, for example, her AC is in the 170s, and her PRR, it just got lowered, but I think it's in the 150s or 60s. But yeah, Ginger is a really strong healer, so you can get away with having a little bit lower numbers.
My Paladin, I think, generally has... I just checked his numbers, and I want to say his PRR was around 160 now, after the changes. And, I've never really found him to struggle staying alive, even on Epic Elite. Might need a little bit more healing than if you had more. My reasoning behind some of that, though, is, it's not. I don't build him just as. I mean, he's a tank. That's kind of his sword and board tankish build. But I also want him to be able to do a little bit of DPS. So he's skewed towards the tanking, but I have made build choices that sacrifice some of his defense to give him a little bit more offense. So he's not completely hapless.
Totally, and that's more fun. You can do that nowadays. You don't see those dedicated tanks nowadays like you did years ago. Now you can do more things, like with Ginger, caster, healer, tank.
The other side of that is the last, 3 or 4 people I've seen that, okay, this guy's a dedicated tank. He's got 1,500 hit points, resting, and, oh, look, he just switched into his tanking destiny. Now he's at 2,000 or whatever. And he looks like he's going to he's going to survive. There's no question about that. Can't hold aggro.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not only that, but they're slogging through regular quests, too.
Yeah.
You just mentioned something that was so important, and I can't believe I forgot to mention it. We're talking about things that are important for survivability.
Hit points?
Hit points. Hit points are so undervalued these days. You see people walk around at cap with 600-700 hit points. It just drives me insane. But some people can get away with that. But there are other things too. In addition to hit points, there are some things that we didn't mention too, like DR, like other qualities like ghostly and concealment, and like blur and displacement and dusk, for example. Although a lot of your raid bosses are going to have true seeing and are going to be able to see past the displacement, but not like ghostly, for example.
Right. Let's see. Let's talk about. We'll kind of make this a combined topic because it's very related. Giving other players a good platform to attack / keeping everyone else alive, because that's really what the tank is. Right? The tank is bait. I mean, let's not mince words.
The chew toy.
Yeah, he's bait. We stick him out there so that the other people don't get eaten, right? So let's talk about. And this is more of a skill thing than a build thing, but focusing the attacks of the boss and allowing everyone else to get a good platform to attack. What are some things that you can do to make that happen?
Everybody should know whether you're going to be the one moving or if they're going to be the one moving. Am I going to move everything or move the mob so that you guys can all attack it? And usually that's like a back to the wall scenario or something like that in VOD. Or am I going to reestablish aggro and then you guys are all going to get behind it? Because otherwise it looks like this hilarious dance where I'm moving around as the tank. They're trying to move around to try and get behind the mob. I'm repositioning. They're repositioning. A lot of that is what was mentioned earlier in communication. So it's like on a boss that shirks aggro, like Lord of Blades, comes back down, maybe you want to be the one moving because now it's more of an indicator that you have his aggro again if you step back and then he comes back to you, and then everybody else can get into position and do whatever they need to do. You also don't want him right on that buff item that he can grab, so you want to move him away from that.
You don't want to set up where he's going to land.
Yeah. So that all needs to be communicated out so that everybody knows, who's. Am I going to turn him onto you, or are you guys going to get behind him, or things of that nature.
Helena of Kyber in the chat is saying, just hold the aggro, he will heal you. I'm going to take issue with that since he's in my guild and I run with him, and he has not healed me on occasion as a tank and let me die.
Busted.
The cake is a lie.
Just saying. Yeah, he's actually a really good healer. And it's probably my fault that I died most of the time. I would say one of the things you want to keep in mind is how do they attack, right? Most raid bosses have some sort of attack from the front that will hit in an arc. So it's not just going to be you specific. So you want to kind of keep that in mind. how wide is their arc? Dragons, particularly when you're talking about the bigger dragons, when they breathe, they sweep. It's not just like a small cone in front of them. They can get, like Truthful, I think, is like 180-degree arc with his breath weapon. So, you want to face. I always tell people, face him towards the wall because there's much less opportunity for people to get hit by that. That also, you kind of imagine generally a line, right? So there's you, and then there's the raid boss, and then behind that is all the off-tank DPS, right? That's what's going to kill him. The tank's not going to kill the boss. Unless, there's some really great builds out there that part of the reason we just got some balance changes was because there were some builds out there that was a little too good. But generally, when you're talking about kind of more traditional tanking, the off-tank DPS is really what's generally going to kill the boss. Particularly when you're talking about the big, tougher bosses, like the dragons. Stormreaver is, in relative terms, from tanking, he doesn't have a lot of hit points compared to most other raid bosses. So you can see tanks take him down a lot faster. But generally, so the tank needs the off tank DPS, right? That's what's going to kill him. So make sure that you're giving them a good platform to do that. So conversely, if you put the bosses back to a wall, or in Lord of Blades, you put the bosses back towards the goo outside, there's nowhere for the other guys to get in there and attack him, which is a problem. So you need to do that. Soft Eye is saying, positioning is a key of tanking no matter what game you're playing, which I think is a good point. And I'm also going to throw in there, in terms of positioning, put yourself where the healer can heal you. Don't hide in the cubby. See that in Fall of Truth a lot. People would used to back their ass into the corners, like really into the corners around the pillars. And Fall of Truth has, his breath weapon's 180-degree arc, and he's got that long tail. So the healer, you think about that positioning, right? Where I talked about, where you generally have the tank, boss, off tanks. The healer is generally going to be the best position consistently that I've found is about 90 to 100 degrees off of that. Which, see, you're not close to the guy, but you're still in range of both sets of groups, right? But I've seen, as a healer, I've had some people just really go ass into that corner, and I'm like, hey, dude, you need to move because I can't heal you there. Well, why don't you go move somewhere else? I'm going to let you die before I go stand next to the dragon that's going to kill me.
That speaks to don't piss off your healer.
Well, it's a piece of communication too, right?
Yeah, communicate with your healer and with your party.
The healer just told you that where you have positioned is not working for them.
Yeah, you got to remember you're a team. If you need somebody to heal you, you two are a team. It's very important that you get along, you make friends, and that you communicate.
This is probably why Helena let me die, is because I probably did something like this. He just said in the chat that he has selective healing. It's true, he does. But yeah, it's one of those things, positioning is so key. I mean, I'd say it's probably third on the list. It's probably the highest, in terms of skill, the highest thing that you got to figure out how to do is where are you going to position the boss so that you can hold aggro, so everyone else can attack it, and the healer can get you, right? Not most healers I know don't carry in large, so they're not going to heal you way across the room unless they have Cocoon, and that's only going to get you so far. So keep that in mind.
Ooh, heal lamp too. We should probably mention that that's important for a tank.
Extra heal lamp is good.
Yeah.
It definitely increases your healing. Especially you don't see it as much. Back in the days when you get a lot more scroll healing, heal lamp was a lot more important. Because that gets you a lot farther, really helps the healers out, reduces the resources that they're using, and heal lamp is not that hard to get.
Yeah, don't be one of those Warforged walking around with no heal lamp where heals are hitting you for 200 and think that a healer is going to keep you alive when you're tanking an epic elite raid boss.
If you're going to be a Warforged tank, if you really want to be a Warforged and you really want to be a tank character, unless you're running with a dedicated party, like a static group, that you've got some arcane that's really going to be healing you a lot, A heal scroll should heal you for more than a reconstruct scroll. That's your goal. Just saying. Because you're going to get a lot more heal scrolls than you're going to get reconstruct scrolls. You're probably going to hear a lot about that, too. I have a Warforged Barbarian tank, so it's like the worst of all the worlds there.
Oh, God.
Hey,
there was a time when that was desired for VOD. Way back.
Hey, he's got great heal amp. I mean, it's one of the things is because I know that he's designed to do some tanking, so I get all the heal amp on him I can. He's got all the enhancements for heal amp. He's got the best items I could muster in heal amp. They don't all stack now, but he still keeps them around if he needs some extra healing amp. He throws those on. Yeah,
Barbarian gets that handed to them in spades nowadays too.
Yeah, that helps a lot. It really does. I do need to redo his enhancements though. Any case, all right. Anything else about positioning before we move on? All right. Let's talk about. You wanted to talk about classes. Let's talk about classes that are good for tanking. Obviously, fighters and fighters and paladins.
Yes, those are like your core.
Barbarians are good too. They survive in a different manner. They're probably going to take more damage and have a lot less self-healing. But they're still... You're going to be a little bit more DPS, probably. Hopefully. Otherwise, there's not much point in building a barbarian tank. You have a druid tank.
Yeah,
right?
I love...
talk about that?
A druid, you can build a lot of other classes to be effective tanks. So that you're not locked into that sort of traditional tank role, like we were talking earlier about having a multifaceted tune that you can do different things and tank when needed, and do DPS when you want to as well. So druid, cleric, even favored soul, even though like intimidate's a cross-class skill for favored soul, so it's harder to get really high intimidate. New warlocks, the enlightened spirit tree, you can do some tanking there. I'm working on building an enlightened spirit tank right now, although with some of the new balance paths is going to make things even more challenging.
It's worth noting that if you're really going to look to have that solid intimidate skill, and it's not a class skill, one level of fighter will give you the maximum ability. It'll make it so you can get the highest level intimidate you can. It'll still be more expensive, but you can get it. The nice thing about taking fighter too, even one level of fighter gets you 2 feats and the intimidate skill, because you get tower shield and a bonus feat. A second level of fighter gets you another feat. A third level fighter gets you defensive stance. A fourth level gives you a speed boost and another feat. So you can just a little bit of splash like that. 2 monk gives you two monk feats and evasion. So you can do a lot of nice splashing there too. Chai, do you have any thoughts on classes?
It doesn't have to be conventional, like your traditional sword and shield and heavy plate tank. You can pretty much use any class nowadays. Some will just be easier than others to get to the benchmarks that you'd actually want for survivability, but it can be done. Usually what people will do if they have a character that has been TR'd a lot and epic TR'd a lot, and they think that it would fit that role, that's where the unconventional ones usually come in, because that helps them hit those benchmarks. And they've played long enough where they have all the gear and stuff like that. But it doesn't, it really doesn't need to be a specific class. And that's probably one of the main differences between DDO and a lot of other games out there is, you're not really locked in class-wise where you have to be like one class is just the best choice and all the other ones are kind of secondary.
It's one of the best things about the game, really, is you have that flexibility to go really crazy and do something. Like I said, I was contemplating doing a tank out of every class, and I wasn't having trouble coming up with ways to do that. Even going really deep into some of those classes, there's going to be some splashing, but you can really go deep. I don't want to give a shout out to some you can do some kind of wacky tanking things. One example is range tanking, which is great in Fire on Thunder Peaks. Those dragons hit hard at times. I've seen a lot of. And my general MO is, if I can do it, if I've got two really strong range characters, they're my tanks. It's kind of more of a kiting tank thing. When Master Artificer came out, I used to range tank the purple one on my Ranger, which ended up being like a game of dodgeball. Other than the fact that if he hit me once, I generally died or almost died, and I had to hit him 500,000 times. But it was fun. You can do some interesting tanking things there. I've seen Pale Masters be a tank on like Sulu and Tower of Despair when that was endgame. We'd have a Pale Master be the tank, and especially if we had another Pale Master come up right behind and they could stack their auras on each other, that'd get you a long ways. Helena is saying he'll tank on his cleric. I was actually tanking a dragon and Fire on Thunder Peaks on my cleric the other day. Not intentionally. I just, for some reason, on my healing cleric was able to hold aggro more than anyone else. I guess it was because I was the one attacking him. I don't know.
Cleric with a couple levels of Paladin used to be really popular.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention, it's a race thing, but we need to mention this because we talked a lot about Intimidate, and we didn't talk about it there. Half-elves get an extra Intimidate use. Because half-elves in addition to the actual skills, for bluff, intimidate, and diplomacy, they get a second kind of click of that. It's on a longer timer, but it's an extra use of that skill.
I didn't know that. I never played a half-elf.
Yeah, it's probably, I would say in today's environment, I would say that's the best thing a half-elf has going for it in terms of a race. The dilettantes can be kind of neat.
Definitely not the looks.
Yeah. Ouch. Burned. What about the dancing skills?
Yeah. Oh, big time. They have some dancing skills.
They got some dancing skills. But yeah, so as a half-elf, the diplomacy and bluff one, I've never really heard people really talking about and really wanting to use that a lot, and being kind of the reason why they're playing that character. But the Intimidate can be huge. We had a guy in one of my old guilds when Lord of the Blades was endgame. He made a half-elf tank specifically, and the main reason why he did that was because he would have that second Intimidate use. And this was back when it was Intimidate and Turtle Up was kind of the MO in there. So that can be really, that might be a compelling enough reason for you to go half-elf. I've never used it, and I would tell you that in today's gaming environment, that's not necessary. You don't need that extra one if you build well, but it can be really helpful. Particularly if you're a new player and you just kind of want that extra little safety net, it's there for you. And on that top note, too, other races, humans are great because they have extra healing amp. Half-elves can get some extra healing amp with their monk dilettante line. Dwarfs are always... I like dwarfs as tanks. They're pretty sturdy. They've got some nice enhancements, although my dwarf tank doesn't go very deep into those enhancements. I still like Warforged as tanks. I think it's a pretty slick ability to turn an arcane into a secondary healer for you. That can be nice. Any other races you guys tend to like for tanking?
I always play humans, man. I have all humans and a drow,
Drow paladins tend to be popular still.
I'm actually doing a drow warlock tank right now, which is not at all ideal, but it's sort of...
You get plus 2 to charisma.
Theme and the challenge of it is what I like, but I would not recommend it.
I went human on my warlocks. But, all right. Tirith in the chat a while back asked us a question here. For a completely new player, would you recommend building a tank as your first character?
No.
What can we suggest for a first-time player?
Absolutely not.
I wouldn't shy away from it. but don't expect to be tanking raids for a bit. If
that's
you
a good
play
point.
like Paladin or Fighter or something like that, experiment with all of it. Take the enhancements, use your shield, and see how much less damage you take than when you're not using it. But yeah, when you first get into raiding, at that point, don't expect to be like the person that gets chosen to tank the boss, and keep DPS in mind because of that. So even if you are playing something that is like designed, like it's a design purposes, it's supposed to be a tank. If you have like different feats and you use like the two-handed fighting feats, keep a two-hander on you, keep power attack, even if you have combat expertise as well, etc. So you can still participate in those raids, and then be observant, so that you can then focus on hitting the benchmarks that are needed when you start TRing and epic TRing and gearing and stuff like that. So then you can eventually turn that character into that tank.
It's good advice.
It's a good qualifier.
Yeah, would I recommend building a tank for a first character? I would say yes. More from a standpoint that it's probably going to be a character that's going to survive better for you. Now, having said that, I mean, we're kind of talking more about raid caliber tanking, and there's a step there, right? There's building a tank for normal content, and then there's a raid tank, because raid tanking is not just about building. There's a lot of skill, and if you listen back to what we've been talking about a lot, we've been talking about a lot of skill things. There's some build things in there, but it's a skill. It's not just a building thing. Now, to be sure, if you want to be a tank, if you want to be a tank, some things that you can do is, build a tank. There's nothing wrong with building a tank as your first character. You'll have a good character that's going to be survivable, which will probably lead to more early enjoyment of the game as you're learning the game and kind of getting through those steps. As you're trying to learn to become a raid caliber tank, in quests where there's kind of more of a tougher end boss, really try and hold that aggro. Give good positioning. The other people might not be on board and are probably just going to be doing their own thing and just smashing with a hammer instead of being really finesse. But you can still, practice those things. That might actually be an even better point of reference of, are you able to hold aggro while these guys are going nuts with their DPS? That's a good indicator that, you might be ready to tank a raid. There's a knowledge thing in there, so I know Voodu and I lead. I'm not sure if Chai leads a lot of raids, but I would say that I generally shy away from having someone tank a boss on their first run of a raid. But I've helped people and taught people how to tank a lot of times. I'm not shy about having someone tank for the first time. I just don't like it to be their first run of the raid. And I usually like to have another person who is familiar with it and can step in as a backup, if that's going to be the case, if I have the personnel. Now, having said that, I've run raids without someone really ideal to back up a guy who wants to be a tank, and it's the first time running the raid and tanking that guy. I've done that, and I've had success with that too. So it's not an end-all, be-all.
I said a resounding no when you first asked that question, but you guys had some good qualifiers that I wanted to add on, and that, if you're really interested in the idea of doing a tank and you are new, then there's nothing wrong with that. But like Chai said, don't expect to tank raid bosses right away. Build for tankiness and survivability, like Patrick said. In fact, anybody, I think, if they're new to this, build for survivability, and then once you start getting comfortable and you find you're able to stay alive, you can ratchet things back to a comfortable point for you. But in the beginning, I don't think it's a problem to be over survivable. And if you want to build towards that tankiness, go for it. And don't be afraid when you get into raids to tell the leader, look, I want to learn more how to tank. Is it possible I could tank this boss? I've never done it before. ask if there's a backup, those kinds of things. But don't be afraid to say that you're new, but you want to learn. If you say you want to learn, so many people are going to be happy to teach you.
And even maybe your first run, you're a guy who wants to. You have a build that's a tank. You want to be tanking in that raid. Let the leader and the tank know, hey, I know I'm not tanking this time, but I want to learn how to tank. And then kind of have a conversation before and after the raid, like, hey, I saw you doing this during the raid. Why were you doing that as a tank?
Ask questions.
Yeah, you
Good
might get
point.
a lot of, I don't know, that's what I was taught how to do. You might not get a lot of great answers on that. But, you might run into someone, here's Voodu. He's got some great videos about tanking bosses on raids. You can look for guilds that run a lot of raids. Keep an eye on the LFM panel. You'll probably see some names that might pop up, or someone's running a raid, and maybe you're not ready to run the raid, but hey, while you're forming the raid, can I ask you a few questions about what I should be doing 5 levels before I get there so I can be a tank? So some things that you can start looking at.
Also want to.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, before I forget, I want to mention one thing. Like, if you're just wanting to sort of test things out, you've built for tankiness and you want a place to practice. One of the things you can do is go into Fire on Thunder Peak, because immediately you have access to the bosses. You go on normal and try hard, try elite. You got them right there, and so you can practice just by yourself.
Or bring a friend so you can separate them.
Yeah, moving the dragons around or something.
And there's no trash in the first phase of that raid either.
Exactly, it's just you and the dragons.
It's a great tip. Last thing before we kind of move out of here, I want to talk briefly about emergency tanking. And what I mean by this is, tank's dead. Some of these raids, the tank doesn't get right back up. You're now the tank. You had no intention of being the tank. What are some tips we got for you?
Learn how to kite.
Kiting? Okay, that's a good one. Don't run people over while you're kiting.
It depends. Can you actually tank on the platform that you're on? Like if you were DPSing as a paladin, for instance, are you that dude that can throw on a shield and like take the aggro if nobody DPSs until they can get the tank back up? Or are you like the ranger that was many-shotting halfway through when the tank died and you can't tank on that platform? If you can, it'd be cool if you pull the boss away so that somebody can raise the tank, or it might even be a waiting period in some of the raids that have that until they can get that person back up. But yeah, if not, circle strafing is your friend.
Just make sure you communicate so you're not running people over.
Yeah.
I would also say that keep in mind, it might not be the tank gets back up and he's ready to go. He might need some buffs, might need to wait for some death penalties to wear off, stuff like that. I've been in Fall of Truth where a guy could tank the Reaver just fine until he died. And as soon as he went down,
that saving throw.
Yeah, and then he just can't get back. The hit points just can't quite get back up there, and for whatever, maybe the jewel cloak's gone, spell absorption's gone. Now you get be a little exciting. Nothing wrong with kiting. Go ahead.
I'm having flashback to some recent EE Fire on Thunder Peaks that I was tanking, and it's so hard to when you start getting those death penalties stacking up, and those dragons are doing 400% damage. It becomes a very humbling experience.
It can very fast. Some things I would say is be aware of what the boss is. It's not really a great idea to kite the Storm Reaver around.
No.
It gets messy. So here's some things that you can do. First off is a lot of my characters actually, they're not built as tanks, but my fighter, my monk, they are both built with the idea, even my warlock to a smaller degree, they're built with the idea that they could be an ad hoc tank if I needed them to be, right? So I've made a few, not a lot, but I've made a few build choices. I mean, they're general survivability things. but to have them a little better off. And maybe we can't find someone, and I'm like, all right, fine, I'll tank. Throw in Unyielding Sentinel, which I almost always have Unyielding Sentinel set up to be a tanking destiny. It's kind of really what it's built for anyways. But for whatever character I have it on, I can throw it on and go tank them. I'll also say you can be surprised about what you can actually get away with. I have tanked the Storm Reaver on just about every one of my characters. Some more successfully than others, but I've done some things there. Last-ditch scenario, if you're stuck with the guy, go balls to the wall DPS until you die. Unless there's a reason you don't want him to reach a certain point in health, just go for it. If you got a healer that can come over and you can get in there and try and keep you alive, it might be more resource intensive, but if your tank, the tank you had wasn't cutting it, can't do it anymore, you're now the tank, just go nuts with the DPS. You got if turtling up is just going to leave you in a stalemate, go for it. You can also at this point go to tank by committee, which if you're really skillful can be okay, I'm ready for my turn, tag, I'm it. Most times it's going to be he's dead, next. I've done Lord of Blaze that way, and I've done Fall of Truth that way with the Storm Reaver. And it's just a rotation. Who's up? You stay alive as long as you can, and you go nuts with the DPS, and you just force it with a hammer, and there you go.
Usually when I see that, it's in a recovery phase. Leg wipe, Jivers recovery. Whoever's the first up has to deal with all the company, and then the person that's second up has to deal with some of the company, or they have to be the reser. It's one or the other.
Or I've seen usually when I've happened, either we're doing Lord of Blaze was endgame. We do Lord of Blaze. We couldn't really find a tank, but we're just doing it on Epic Normal anyways. So it's like, all right, well, and the Lord of Blaze is a little bit easier because he has those mechanics where he jumps up. And it's like, all right, tag, you're up, right? You just kind of rotate through. Get 3 or 4 people in that, even 2. You can actually get a lot. You can do that right surprisingly well doing that. And I've also had Fall of Truth or my Storm Reaver tank a couple times. Oh yeah, I can totally tank the Storm Reaver. 3 minutes into the fight, my Pale Lavender's gone. Yeehaw. All right.
Forgot your swap out item in the bank.
Something. All right, so we're gonna move into the news here. And I'd like to say one final thing.
Yep.
About tanking. I think it's a lot of fun. If you've never done it before, I found it to be a fun challenge. I played this game for 4 years before I started tanking, and I started tanking because the tanks in my guild stopped playing as much, and we were always sitting there waiting for a tank, and so I started working toward that way, and I have found it to be a very fun experience, a challenging experience. I've also learned the raids better. I've been leading raids for over 5 years, but only been tanking them for 2, so it helped me to really learn firsthand the other side, all the facets of the raid, and it helps me lead raids better because even if I'm not the tank, if I know what is necessary because I've experienced it, I can, interrogate a potential tank or tell him what to do if he's new and, find out if he has the stats that are needed and direct him like I need to as a raid leader.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of it. If you're a leader, don't be afraid to let new people try to tank. It's fun. It's a fun aspect of the game. It's a little bit different of aspect of the game. A little bit different goal. It can be fun. A lot of fun. All right, so we're going to move into the news, and we're going to start with balance changes, which are live now. We'll get to that, but just some stuff that I wanted to get in there. So this is kind of some stuff that some communication from the devs on this. The goal of the balance changes is that the design integrity of most builds is still intact. They don't want to try to bribe players into accepting the changes. They want them to be able to test the builds and see that they play fine, and their builds don't need drastic changes to be able to have fun in the game. They try to adhere to that a balancing policy of bringing up underperforming trees as much as possible, but they've had a lot of feedback this has led to power creep, and that, quote, some balance changes would be occasionally to be needed in the other direction. There's a question about why not finishing the class pass first. Sev said that was a good question. The reason they are doing this now is because as they do further class passes, the players looking at them are comparing them to existing builds. The design, if the design is behind those existing classes in terms of power, then people don't like the balance pass, and sometimes you get angry at it. So that's kind of where they're at with that. In terms of smaller changes, when they work on small incremental power bumps, the player feedback on that balance strategy has been mostly negative. Players communicate to us fairly consistently that they prefer passes that felt, quote, complete rather than small accumulated buffs. If we buffed a subsection of these abilities to help shore up a class but didn't provide a full pass, the player feedback was highly focused in parts of the affected class or tree that was not yet touched. And that they feel that feedback has been fairly consistent on that. Any thoughts on any of that you guys want to share?
Don't panic. If I may
Good
borrow
advice.
a line from Hitchhiker's Guide, just breathe and relax. There are a lot of people, like, their hair is catching on fire over this. They're screaming and screeching, I'm going to quit, blah, blah, blah. Just take a breath and remember it's just a game, guys.
Yeah, the major post that I saw was that your character should not play any differently, even if it does a few % less DPS or can survive like one less magical hit because of the MRR nerf or whatever. It should not play any differently. People shouldn't have to swap out of builds to be effective, and if they do, that's good feedback, but it should be objective feedback with data rather than just, screw this, I'm leaving because my X class sucks where it ruled before. Your playstyle shouldn't change at all. That was the big one. Like, if you played your paladin a specific way before, you should play your paladin. You should be able to play your paladin the same exact way now, and it shouldn't be so much less effective that it just doesn't hold its own in the same content.
They actually said, so in terms of providing respecs, they gave everyone a coupon code for 2 + 5 Hearts of Wood.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so...
And the free
This
feet
was-
exchange.
Yeah,
Holy
and Fred
Lord.
Fred is free until Tuesday, I believe.
Get on it.
So if you've been holding off on changing some feats, have at it. You got a great opportunity here.
And have some fun, too. You can experiment around for a few days.
It's kind of a neat one. But one of the reasons, so that idea that they don't want, their goal is that your build should not play differently than it had before. This was actually one of the reasons why they added range weapons back into Holy Sword, was because they didn't want those. One of the reasons they did that is they didn't want those players and those characters to play differently, because that was a major aspect of that. So that's something to kind of keep in mind with that. Let's see, anything else in the... I'm out of order a little bit, so... but yeah, so that was why they didn't do plus 20 Hearts of Wood, is because their goal was that you're not really changing that much. You're not changing how the build plays. On the topic of Holy Sword, they did add ranged weapons back in. They also added offhand weapons back into Holy Sword. So the only thing that's not there now that was there before, I think, is shields. And some of the stuff they wanted, some of the reason behind that was they felt the Vanguard was performing well with the shield. Even with it was outperforming. They don't want Vanguard to be a better performer in terms of DPS than other fighting styles, because you get stronger mitigation and defense. At which point they feel like, well, then if you're doing more DPS with Vanguard, why would you even play the other styles? Because you get more DPS and you get better defense. So what's the point of dropping the shield at that point? The other thing that they mentioned with this is Vanguard is in both Paladin and Fighter. they want those to be balanced. So if they find that Vanguard is behind, they want to boost the actual tree so both of them get it, as opposed to Holy Sword just being a paladin thing. So that's some of the reasoning there, which I thought made some sense. And you want Fighter Vanguard to be as good as, and not any better than Paladin Vanguard, and vice versa. So that's kind of where some of that was. See, in terms of Warlock, their Tainted Scholar Soul Eater builds are doing much more damage than anything that anyone's reported for Warlock. So if I think they were kind of looking for more, if people have sense that their builds are not doing as well, give them that kind of feedback. And again, like Chai said, data really helps with that. The idea of my character doesn't feel like it's playing the same is valuable, but data also helps some of that, if you can still do that. Enlightened Spirit, they're kind of their reasoning. I think the bursts from Enlightened Spirit got some of the bigger nerfs out of Warlock. Part of the reason for that is it's more of a tank mitigation tree. If you invest heavily in that tree, they don't want you to see top DPS numbers. That's by design.
And I'm still killing it. Come on now.
Here's the thing. My Warlock in Enlightened is heavily invested in Enlightened Spirit. He's a part fighter, part bard, swashbuckling kind of thing, and really heavily invested in Enlightened Spirit. It's a blast playing him, literally blasting all the time.
Bumps.
Yeah.
Tell them what they want.
I'm not sure where his DPS is. I don't feel like he's lacking in DPS.
Yeah, I'm not even a max spell power build, and I'm still killing it on EEs.
Especially when you get like Defiler of the Just, in particular, you get a lot of stuff around him. Burst. He was having a blast, again, literally, in Night Revels. I mean, he was tearing through that stuff.
Totally using my Warlock in Night Revels.
Yeah, it was great. In any case, they're retesting Ranger numbers. Some of the times for Rangers look very low, so they're rechecking their numbers on that before they comment. Let's see. They added 2-weapon fighting back into Holy Sword. The numbers for 2-weapon paladins without Holy Sword was behind where they wanted them. So there are some changes. That's why they added that back in. On Acrobats, the quote I got from the devs was, to dispel the myth, Acrobat has a closer ratio of standing still DPS versus moving DPS than any other weapon style they've tested except Warlock. In other words, staff builds suffer the least from moving, which is kind of interesting. Yes, Tirith, that was a melee. My Warlock's a melee build. It's 3 Bard, 3 Fighter, and 14 Warlock. So he has minor swashbuckling shield with Defender from Fighter, and then goes nuts with the bursting and Warlocks from the Enlightened Spirit. And then I have Consumed and Soul Eater too for some point DPS, but a lot of fun. See, other things. There's questions about why Severlin wasn't talking about specific builds. It's not as efficient about talking about builds because you can get really specific with builds, and they're trying to be a little bit more general than that. There's questions about Divine Crusader. Melee cannot sustain the burst of Divine Crusader, and all the other stacking DPS increases the aforementioned Ranger build can use. If range and casting builds could sustain that kind of DPS, they'd have bigger issues. See, they want to be careful that they don't nerf melee classes because the destinies are unbalanced. They'd rather eventually address the destiny situation directly. And we noticed how Sev recently has been kind of burying interesting information in deep in other threads. Players have no way of knowing that new meta magics and new epic feats are coming in Update 29 to further address caster DPS and mana efficiency in epics. These buffs are not something they want to drag into heroic character options. There you go. We'll be a little bit more on that later, actually. Update 28, Patch 1 is live. Go through the release notes pretty quick. 2-weapon fighting animates more quickly. I have not played a 2-weapon fighter since then, so I can't... Did you guys notice that for 2-weapon fighters? Voodu doesn't play 2-weapon fighters.
Nope. I can't say.
I only have one. I haven't really noticed it yet.
Okay.
And that's my rogue, and my rogue kills stuff fairly quickly anyway. So
Yeah, could be a little tricky. Arcane Archers pass. The first pass came through. They still want to do more work on Arcane Archer, but that stuff went in. All of the balance changes went in as well. I think I said Tuesday earlier. Fred is offering free feat changes through Monday night, October 26th, which probably means that it'll probably get turned off sometime Tuesday morning Eastern time. Let's see, other fun stuff. The following warlike feats now break invisibility: Dark Delirium, Hurl Through Hell, and Create Thrall, which seems like ones that would need to do that. The 2-weapon fighting line no longer gives melee power. Divine Grace is now capped at 2 plus 3 times Paladin's level. The improved critical stuff, all that stuff was part of the balance changes. We have new fighter feats, which was part of the balance changes. Many shot and 10,000 stars were changed. Hirelings which use ranged weapons will now switch back to melee more reliably. And hirelings with 2-weapon fighting will re-equip 2 weapons for hand-to-hand combat. New tomes which appear in-game or are purchased in the DDO store will be able to be consumed at any level. And ability tome information now displays in feats. Yay! That's
Hell
pretty
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it is.
It is not a retroactive change. If you're holding on to tomes, they will not do that. There you go. Let's see. They updated Golem's Heart so that it has correct functionality returned, and they updated the tooltip, which is a nice change. Let's see. More balance changes. Hellhound monster manual deeds no longer say they require dragon kills, which is probably good. They scaled down some range damage and monster ability DCs in Temple of Elemental Evil.
after they scaled it up, you mean?
Sure.
A lot of the Epic Elite endgame stuff for quests got scaled up a bit. Players have been kind of noticing that. That's what I'm alluding to. Like if you're playing Necro 4 Epic Elite or Temple of Elemental Evil Epic Elite, and you just walked in there and got shot by an archer, you were like, "Oh man, those aren't your mommy and daddy's archers."
We did
When did they
notice
do
Down a little bit again.
When did this happen?
A couple of weeks ago.
that was the whole thing where level 30 and up quests got a little bit more. They changed how level 30 works. Level 30 plus works with monster scaling.
Yeah.
I did notice. I was in Orchard on Elite, Epic Elite. We were noticing that they were popping us pretty good. My bard, who has no armor, I discovered as he was re-leveling up as a bard, had a rough time in pajamas in there. He now has armor. See. They fixed some issues with double shot, spell critical, and updating on character sheets without needing to be closed and reopened. Some known issues. Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Aura, and Eldritch Blast Chain are all scaling incorrectly with spell power. Mostly the Eldritch Blast and Eldritch Aura are too low. The Eldritch Blast Chain is 2% too high, which is a really odd number. Shadow Archer's bonus critical damage multiplier is not triggering for Elven Arcane Archer. The Barbarian Ravager's blood strength apparently does not have its 1 second cooldown on its on-kill heal. And the Warlike Enlightened Spirit's Eldritch Aura is incorrectly not being affected by arcane spell failure. Let's see.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I haven't actually noticed that, but they don't have spell
Running around in
failure.
heavy armor and blasting everything.
Yeah, you know, that's how it works sometimes. See, improved critical. They definitely do not, going forward, want improved critical to affect any bonuses to threat range for named weapons. They're also sensitive to players who don't want to see existing weapons lose relative power. So they took basically all of the named weapons, or at least that was the intent. There might be a few outliers that didn't get updated. And they increased their threat range to compensate for the loss of the threat range from improved critical. So if you didn't have improved critical, those weapons are now more effective. If you did, they're the same. Anything you guys want to say about the release notes or balance changes briefly before we keep going? Don't Panic, I think was
Don't panic.
yeah.
It's not the end of the world. Look out the window. It's still there.
It's a seesaw battle for them.
Go get your +5 hearts. Wait for the dust to settle. And then
It's actually probably pretty good advice is waiting for the dust to settle before you immediately jump ship on whatever you're playing. Give it a week or
Yeah.
two.
a lot of stuff got reversed in discussions over a few days.
Yeah.
You know, they were going to nerf 2 weapon fighting paladins, and next thing you know, they're not. So, you know, if you're playing something that's under discussion, you might want to wait like a week or two to, you know, before you start making any hardcore changes that you might regret.
On that note, actually, this patch is from the devs. This patch won't be the end of this balanced discussion. Yes, these changes will come to life, but there will be follow-up patches, as they've often done. And if they need to, they can incorporate additional feedback. They already need to fix the elf version of Arcane Archer. As an example, some people asked about the schedule. They had to take into account the new store, and there are other schedule demands involved there. They do want to go back to Arcane Archer in the not very distant future, but it may not be for a few updates or patches. And yeah. Right. Night Revels is out. There was a one-night preview last night. I tried it. I had fun for the most part.
Hell yeah.
The portion when you're kind of farming is still kind of a drag. But I was probably out there for about 2 hours. Like 1 hour of that I was actively kind of messing around and just kind of trying it out. The other hour I was kind of bouncing in and out from making dinner, taking a shower, being AFK, and collecting things. And then I did like 4 tours of all the quests, and I think I still have about 18 keys. So I was able to get a lot of keys. Maybe it's 12 keys. I think I'm down to 12 keys. So I actually found that when just running between the 4 quest doors and killing stuff on the way, I usually got 1 key while doing a circuit, at least.
Dude, see, my first reaction is they need to up the drop rate for the keys. I was getting like 5 to 10 an hour, I think it was. I think they need to as much as double the drop rate for the keys.
Yeah, I thought so too, but I was playing in a group, and I don't know if that affects it or not.
Tough to say.
There are times when I didn't touch anything, and I would get like chocolate, where I would kill stuff, and somebody else in the group would get it. So I don't know if that's happening with keys as well or not.
I think so. I mean, it's always kind of been that way with. I mean, this is the same mechanic as Maybar, just different ingredients.
Yeah.
I will say that, you know, in the first probably hour and 20 minutes, I think I got 10 keys. And then in the matter of 15 minutes, I got 7 more. So, and those 15 minutes, I was kind of in and out a little bit more, so it was kind of weird.
Wow.
There's definitely some randomness to it. But I enjoyed the event. I enjoyed the quests. I enjoyed the event. 4 tours was plenty for one night, but I found it enjoyable.
The first time you run each one of those, if you get all your stars, you get tons of XP too, just like a regular challenge.
150,000.
So we were swapping out characters after each character's first run, so that we could get all the XP that we wanted, and you know, put your character in a crap destiny and just do each quest once, and you'll have the bottom portion of that destiny finished out.
And it's pretty good XP per minute, even the second run too.
We did not find that the level 35 was that difficult.
No.
On
it's
epic
like an
characters.
epic normal quest, basically.
Yeah. The event will return next week. They said it will. So they said it was going to go through November 9th, November 8th, it's somewhere in there. They said both.
8th. November 8th, yeah.
8th was the last one I saw. It is intended that level 7 is the minimum level. There were some questions about disappearing ingredients. They do appreciate feedback on that. There are several reasons why they are trying out this method for event ingredients. One is to encourage people interested in getting items from the event to return to the graveyard in future years, rather than stockpiling stockpiling ingredients in large enough amounts to just come back later. Another is to address the unfortunate issue of event ingredient duplication, should that be inadvertently possible in the future. It's one of the reasons why they were unable to reuse the Maybar stuff. A third is to encourage people to buy items and consumables when they get enough ingredients to do so.
Another reason is so with some of the items that you can get is they don't want to have to balance the game around everybody having those items. Because some of those disappear as well. Some of the
Right.
clicky
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
Have little candy cookies.
Some items are pretty cool. Check them out if you haven't already. I do want to say that I think they need to up the drop rate, or up the amount of ingredients that are dropped in a challenge. And to put things into perspective, if you haven't run it yet, first thing I wanted was to get one of those spooky Wisdom 2 augments. I had to run 16 challenges, 5-star, 16 challenges, to get enough of each ingredient to get that one augment. 16 challenges, that means I got to farm for 16 keys and then take time to run all those challenges. That's a big time investment. And I understand, but it's too much. 16 challenges for an augment.
Yeah, I think the augment one was the one that seemed out of whack to me. I didn't really look at the Maybar items, so I can't really speak to how the Maybar items are balanced in terms of ingredients. But the other new stuff was like 20 of this and 10 of that, which is a tour of the challenges, and you got that. And the challenges are really short.
There's a fixed amount, too. I mean, you do it on the highest difficulty, you get 23 of the ingredients.
Right.
And you need 80 of each for an augment.
Although on the flip side, the augments are clearly like the most powerful item there, at least for the new stuff. So
Some of that
It's a little
stuff
bit,
is
yeah.
mirror of glamoring fodder, like the brooms,
Yeah. That's
Like-
fair.
the hats. You know, they do like minor things, like ooh, I have a flaming spear following me around. It's like, people might glamour those items up and make theme characters and stuff like that. But yeah, the augments are like, wow, I didn't even get one because I logged my character and then logged on the next day and then facepalmed as I remembered it was just a preview for that one day.
It's coming back. I'm hoping that's the one place I think I'd like to see a little bit of adjustment. I do think I agree. 16 runs of those is a little too much.
Take you an hour and a half just to get all the keys for that.
Yeah,
If
I
they
think
doubled
really
the
where-
amount that you get, I think that would be good.
Well, I think where the real disconnect is for me is the keys. It's 16 keys. The
Right.
amount of time in the quests, I don't have a problem with. I think, if I had to run those 16 times, like the amount of time it takes to run like 4 tours, it's 2 hours for an augment. For a +2 stacking to a DC stat. I'm okay with that. 2 hours of running those is
Sure.
fine. But to do that, you need to get a lot of keys. That's where I think the disconnect is for me on those.
That's another 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah, and that, like I said, that's where it is for me. They did say, I think Cordovan said that they're showing that basically other than the augments, it's taking people about an hour to get something. Which for what they are, I think is totally fine. And I get that the augments seem to be a little bit more than that. And like I said, it's the keys. That's where the disconnect is for me, personally. So I think you either more keys or more ingredients.
I feel bad for the people that are like more casual and don't have as much to playtime. Like me, I don't have a life. All I do is play DDO. So I'm gonna get all I want.
And watch Michigan State lose football games. Or
Michigan, not
lose
Michigan
Michigan lose football games.
I'm not emotionally invested in it.
Sorry, it was there.
I'm just a
I
casual
had to
fan. I'm just a casual fan.
So yeah, other than that, I did like I liked what they did with the quest. I know the quests are reused. I didn't find them difficult. I liked the decor, all the pumpkins everywhere. It was kind of fun. It did make me really think, though, that we really need like a guild. We've got plenty of room on some of these bigger guild ships. It'd be great to just have like a seasonal room that just, when these various events got turned on, maybe it had the vendor for those different events. So whenever Night Revels was active, it'd be filled with pumpkins, and have the Night Revels vendor for Crystal Cove. Maybe it'd have some pirates and birds or something. Something like that. That'd be good for a guild airship spot, right?
I would just fill Stormreach with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that'd be cool too. But then, like, if there's no event running, it could be like a partied room that nobody cleaned up. You know, like streamers hanging from the ceilings and like torn down. Yeah, there's an idea for you, devs. That'll be kind of fun. Caster power and feats. Casters have some cool stuff coming in update 29. Casters will see their spell power bonuses for each epic level, like melee and ranged power, to help make epic levels more relevant. There'll be at least one epic meta magic. They're also working on how it will affect warlock abilities. There'll be ways to increase mana efficiency in epic levels, particularly against bosses. This will be in addition to the legendary level 30 feats they can choose from. Fun news there. And they're also exploring some other ideas that require tech, like a temporary spell point buff if an enemy makes its saving throw against your spell, but no promises there. They might have to drop the idea for tech or balance reasons. So that was kind of cool news. I'm more interested to hear about the legendary level 30 feats. That could be fun. Let's see. Bugs. They're investigating an issue with seems to impact monk hand wraps, unarmed and animal forms, not getting critical. Something was critical. I'm not sure if it was.
Hand wraps are broken again?
Yeah, right. Surprise.
No.
See, bonus days through the weekend, double mysterious remnants. Store news. We have a new store. Yay. This is going to be interesting. So here's some of the details about how this is going to happen, how transactions will be handled in the new store. Exala, our new partner, will host the storefront and will be sending receipts for all transactions. Turbine will continue to process credit card payments just like in the old store. Emergent, our other new partner, handles processing for all alternative payment methods such as Sofort, banking, and PaySafe cards. And presumably also the Burger King and Subway gift cards. As always, your personal information is kept confidential and meets all PCI reporting standards across all three companies. So what do you guys think about that?
I don't even think about it. That's what I think of it.
That's fair enough. I was a little surprised I didn't see more comments on this on the forums. I mean, it's two new companies that we didn't really hear about before, and it sounds like they now have access to our personal information as well. I don't know.
If you have a credit card on file, along with like your account details and stuff like that, yeah, that's kind of the way a lot of the software industry in general is going. You'll notice that software companies that sell software as a download, a lot of them are having third-party processing companies do like order processing as well. So this is not just a video game thing.
Yeah. I would say pay with a credit card or some very secure method. Do not use a debit card. Something that you can challenge charges to. That's what you're looking for. And that's just a good online tip. Some other stuff. As a reminder, the bookmarks feature has become the favorites feature. You can add any item to your favorites by clicking the star. Some purchase history from the old store may not yet appear in your history page. They're able to keep that history and will be importing it into the new store soon. The filter for character option is not yet available in the new store. However, any item that your character is not qualified for due to race, class, or level restrictions will be visible, but with a small attention alert above the item price to indicate that the item might not be appropriate for that character, but you are still able to buy the item. This also means that any items currently unavailable due to active VIP status are not visible at all. In the previous store, you could not purchase them, but you could view them. Known issues. They're investigating an issue where a store is sometimes not placing the item in the inventory after applying a coupon or making a purchase. Logging out and back in will cause the item to show up. Temporarily, the Menace of the Underdark and Shadowfell Conspiracy bundles are unavailable in the store, but you can purchase them in the DDO market. While running DDO through Steam, you can't currently update your credit card information through the new store. Instead, please update the credit card in Steam directly, designate it, and then make purchases. The Heroic Learning Tome upgrade may not display in the store for some characters. They've identified an issue with the currency difference and are working on applying a fix. It is not their intention to add an extra charge. It didn't work that way in the old store and is not intended to do so in the new one. In the meantime, if you've been impacted by this, please contact the account support team for assistance. They will bring another update once this fix is in place. They also discovered an issue that was preventing turbine point purchases through the DDO store in-game last night, and they corrected it. If folks are still continuing to run an issue, let them know. New payments. Thanks to Zala, their new partner, makers of the new DDO store, supporting a vendor called Paygarden. They don't get free burgers or sandwiches when you use the cards. However, it does make it pretty easy to find a turbine point card and get it in someone else's hands, and perhaps also a sandwich to boot. They did want to make a note that some of these alternative play methods may not be available right away. It might not come until next week. Territory does matter and is based on your physical location, so you may not be able to see all of the payment methods. Coupon codes. They're aware that the current coupon code lettering and numbering structure is not ideal. Something they're looking to improve in the future. Please, yes. Speaking of codes, to celebrate the new store, there's free items. If you use the code, I am not going to read it. Go look at the store. It's a random series of lowercase, uppercase letters, and numbers, and it's cap sensitive. But you can get 2 free plus 5 free hearts of wood. You can also get 4 free lasting Night Revels keys with another code. And they also said that they're going to give out another 4 next week when the event comes back out.
There you go, 8 keys.
Yeah.
That's like 45 minutes of farming.
Yeah, okay. Anything you guys want to say about the store?
Looks nice. The background image needs to be changed, though. It's kind of hard to read with the gray and black in the back.
I haven't taken a look at it yet.
I liked the scrolling as opposed to the page turning. That was kind of nice. Let's see. Sales for the week through October 29th. 20% off of monster manuals, Slayer count boost, creature companions and accessories, and companion name changes. You can also get a long-lasting bear stamina potion. You can get 5 of those. There is a code. I'm not going to read the code. You can go on the store. You can also look at our calendar. It's in our calendar under the sales for the week. You can check it out. There was no Chronicle this week. Some quick videos I want to mention. Let's try and cruise through a lot of this because we're running over time. Axel DDO had an Update 28 video. The Order of Syncletica talked about Zen balance, how the balance changes impacted his monks. Voodu had a Night Revels video, where I think he went through all the quests.
Yep.
The Shady Rogues did the Tide Turns. If you haven't watched the Shady Rogues, they're kind of fun to listen to. They're almost as much fun as having Lessa play. So they're a lot of fun. Dirty William also had a video on Update 28.1. See, DDO Players News had their 55th episode with Bonnie Bew this week. The Saga of Amastress had a date with Evil, who's talking about crafting a rapier in Temple of Elemental Evil. The Stormreach campaign had a nice write-up on the history of the Silver Flame, so if you like lore, this is your blog for the week. It was really good. Let's see, DDOCast Splat is still on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Hopefully we'll have Lessa back this week. Something's been lacking a little bit there, and the deaths have been more numerous, and the shaves have been close. Also, the prizes for episode 400, I'm starting to get those out. There's going to be a little bit of delay because I'm trying to kind of have to work down the list a little bit, so I make sure I get the big prizes away. So it'll take a little bit of time for me to get that, and I've been kind of busy this week. I'm also working on another Ask the Devs, so if you have a question, an appropriate polite question that you would like me to ask the devs, please leave a comment or send me an email at ddocast@gmail.com. I will completely ignore questions that are irrelevant or not nice. Put it that way. The post for the week. Halo Toto wrote in that he left the game because of the changes that happened. He does like listening to the debates. Both his pure Vanguard Pally and pure 2-weapon fighting Barbarian got hit with multiple nerfs. He's not going to redo 4 months of gameplay just to catch up. Sorry you feel that way. I totally understand that, that's an option for you. I hope you check it out come back in a month. That would be my recommendation. If you don't like the changes, come back in a month. See how it plays then.
Play your Vanguard and see how different it is.
Yeah.
Like, I noticed that the stats look a lot different, but I haven't really been noticing much of an actual play difference.
Yeah, I don't want to invalidate the idea that you feel like you want to leave. That's fine. I get it. Things change. You don't like the changes. That's fine. I would just say, come back, try it later. Give it some breathing space. Take a breath. That's totally fine. See how you like it later. You might find that you still like the game, and you might come back and it doesn't change a whole lot for you. Our survey questions of the week. I'm going to save that for later because we are going long here, and that's a longer question. So with that, do you guys want to give some shout-outs to your channels and stuff?
Voodu Spyce on YouTube, almost 250 videos now. Just did that Night Revels video, and I'm just started a new series, Voodoo Warlock. I'm doing an Enlightened Spirit tank. Check that out. And tomorrow I'm going to be posting a video and officially announcing I'm doing a big 100 question trivia event on Sarlona, Halloween night, 10 p.m. Eastern. Awesome prizes, epic elite gear, lots of other good stuff. And when I post that video, watch it in the dark, alone, at night.
So is it a live event or is it a video?
Oh, I'm posting a video just to sort of announce it.
Got
And then the event itself is going to be Halloween night, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Sounds
It's
like
just
fun.
a fun little video I did.
Cool. Chai, do you want to plug the Sublime Permadeath Guild at all?
Yep, we're at nodeath.guildportal.com. And that's only when Guild Portal is coterminous with the Prime Material plane, because their sites tend to go down every once in a while. If you come read our rules and decide that that's for you, hit one of us up in game by doing a search by guild and scrolling down to the T's because it's the Sublime Permadeath, and then just give one of us a towel and on a level 1 character and we'll invite you in.
Great. Thanks, guys, for joining me for the show, and thanks to the other folks that are helping out with DDOcast. And thanks to Charbine and Wizards for making DDO. Still love you guys. The nerfs hurt a little bit, but we still love you guys. And thanks to Cyberbears for hosting the podcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, our counter, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you'd like to be a part of the show, if you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like us to answer, or a topic you'd like us to debate, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment. If you have something you want us to ask the devs, leave a comment. You can also email us at ddocast@gmail.com, and you can find us on social media. Follow us for latest cast updates there. The closing tip for the week comes from Algon on Sarlona. The tip he finds himself giving people the most is to forget all the min-maxing and to just have fun.
Great advice.
Especially
I
this
love
week.
it.
Especially
yeah, have
this week.
fun.
So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chest level appropriate. Have fun, and don't forget to check out Night Revels when it comes out next week.